Oh my God. This comic is amazing. Oh my God, dude. Man, son. Let's just get into it. Okay, so this picks up with the Ultimate Avengers waiting on the arrival for someone. And it's kind of cool because they were initially sent there by Doctor Doom in the sense that Doom had basically picked up on a temporal signal. Now, as always, if you're getting caught up, right, with Ultimates, we do have a playlist, but I will make sense of everything as we go on because the maker, son. Okay, so here's the cool thing about this, right? So as this group's traveling there, the Ultimates are just kind of like, why in this place, right? There's literally nothing here. It's just like nothing but corn, right? We're just this kind of no man's land. But then like the ship comes crashing down into this place. And the initial thought of the Ultimates is that the maker is somehow returned, that he's arrived here. Now, remember, right? The maker was the one that was responsible for screwing up everybody's history in this alternate universe and then trying to turn it into his own. Now, initially he was defeated, but he's locked away inside the giant city out there in the world. And the dome opens in 10 months, so we don't know what he's been doing in there. We don't know if he's been sitting there just sulking, if he's been watching The Office, if he's been playing Marvel Rivals and just astonished at how amazing his character is, or if he's been like building an army. We don't know what it is that's been happening. And I can't wait to find out. It's going to be amazing. But when this ship opens up, you end up with basically the Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Now, here's the cool thing about this, right? This team is so broken. They are so overpowered. It's absolutely nuts. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. But there's this amazing statement, right, that Captain Marvel makes when she gets out here. She says, crossed uncountable eons, pursued by fourth dimensional hyperconquerors through the rise and fall of empires, waded through drowned armies of twisted pseudo-legends, face down in the superflow, traded information with the vast, cool intelligences outside of time, all to find you, America Chavez. And like, America doesn't know who she is, right? She's like, I've never met you before, right? Like, who are you? And that's where Captain Marvel's like, together we defeated the Ultron Dominion, splitting ourselves through the Infinity Prism to fight simultaneously in every moment of time and space. When the 24th Celestial Host returned and judged the Milky Way a failure, it was us who developed a new form of super diplomacy to convince them otherwise. And it was your idea to work together to generate enough cosmic energy to convert contraction to expansion, turning the negative zone into the positive zone and ushering in a new age of abundance, peace, and growth for that backward universe. Now, there's a couple things to explain here because these are some bold statements. Number one, what's the superflow? Okay, so the best way to explain this, the explanation that I always use, is that if you're looking at a brick wall, the bricks are the individual universes. The mortar in between the bricks is the superflow. It's the space between universes. Now, the superflow is wonky, right? Like if you were somehow to be able to leave this universe, so to speak, and go into the superflow, the space between universes, you would just see the superflow forever. You wouldn't see, it's not like DC Comics where you would just see a whole bunch of Earths out there, you travel to one and you enter into that reality. Instead, every universe, for lack of a better word, has its own kind of frequency. So unless you know how to enter into that frequency, Marvel kind of borrowed that idea from DC Comics and The Flash, unless you know how to enter into that universe, then you'll just travel through the superflow forever, right? Like you'll never get past it. Think of each universe as like the incursion wall from Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers when the incursions were happening. You would see nothing until you passed through the incursion wall. Then you would see the other Earth in the atmosphere getting ready to crash into yours, right? That sort of thing. Now, the next thing to talk about here, the Ultron Dominion. Now, I don't know exactly how this is going to transpire in the Ultimate Universe. Clearly, Dennis Camp is setting a whole bunch of seeds for like future story arcs. Most likely, this Ultron Dominion is basically the Ultron story arc from a combination of different things in the main Marvel Universe, which actually tell one cohesive story. So you have Age of Ultron, which most of you guys know, where Ultron in the future used Vision in the present day to basically seize control of the world, right? By having Vision kind of operate as an anchor point, right? And through Vision, he just started manufacturing all these Ultron robots. They spread throughout the world like a plague. They killed virtually everybody. Literally, the story opens with Captain America sitting in a corner crying. We need to go back and remaster that story, man. Like, Age of Ultron was so good. But that future was effectively ruled by him. Now, all that was kind of undone, but that went into a story called Ultron Forever, which kind of showed what the world looked like when Ultron had taken control of everything. There were no more Avengers. Instead, there were Ultron robots masquerading as Avengers or believing that there were Avengers. The future of that reality was shown in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers: The New Avengers, when the Time Stone reappears after the Infinity Stones are destroyed, when Captain America tries to stop an incursion, and Captain America's yanked 50,000 years into the future, which kind of shows the end result of the Ultron timeline. Like, it's really, really cool, right? It's really fascinating how all that stuff kind of ties together. This is likely some variation of that. Either that or Ultron just, like, started spreading across the universe. But again, in Ultron Forever, for example, he killed Odin and basically Thor, and then seized control of Asgard. So, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that he did there. The whole negative zone expansion, that kind of thing. For years in the original Ultimate Universe, there was no negative zone. There was just the end zone. And then eventually Marvel just kind of merged them all together, right? And said that the negative zone is a singular place throughout the entirety of the multiverse, and every universe can access it. And so the end zone concept kind of went away, or was at least replaced by the negative zone in the original Ultimate Universe. That's being carried over here, right? So the negative zone she's talking about is seemingly the exact same negative zone from the main Marvel universe. But again, we don't definitively know because we haven't seen that place in forever, right? So who knows what it looks like now. Again, it is kind of a wonky thing because Marvel also toyed with the idea that the Ultimate Universe had its own version of the negative zone, but nonetheless, right? It's just kind of a weird situation. Still, like, with everything going on here, initially Captain America steps up and it's just like, look, like, you're getting pretty aggressive. You need to chill out. And Captain Marvel just blasts it, right? Just like sends this guy flying. And it's like, this doesn't really concern you at all. And it's like, actually, I kind of think it does. And the two groups fight each other. However, fight isn't really the word that I would use. It's not really the phrase I would use. I would say it's more like the Ultimates beating on the side of a skyscraper and the skyscraper just being totally unfazed by what it is that they're doing. Because son, the Ultimates get it absolutely handed to them. While this whole fight unfolds, you kind of get this explanation on who these guys are, right? And Captain Marvel says, "You must remember us, America. That's Star-Lord, master of the solar system, lord of the 12 houses, and the land beyond the sun." And one of the things he says here is the stars sing different, sadder songs now, like far-off funeral music. Now, the weird and wonky thing about his character is, yes, he is immensely powerful, but he almost kind of seems like a Sorcerer Supreme type of character, right? An almost Doctor Strange-esque character. So whether or not this statement about the stars singing sad songs is a literal thing, in the sense that when you have a being out there in Marvel who is kind of part and parcel to the universe, they hear it. They actually hear the universe talking in a kind of way. Or if what he's saying here is more metaphysical, right? Things aren't right in this place. Whatever the case happens to be. But the next person is Ultimate Nullifier. This dude is dope, right? So what we're told, in a duel in the burning back alleys of Pandemonium, he shot Mephisto through his black heart with a nega bullet, single-handedly erasing the concept of eternal suffering from the universe. And like an anime character, this guy gives the hardest line that I think I've ever heard. He's like, "There's no need to struggle. There's nothing to struggle against." And it's dope, dude. It's this... Son. It's amazing, right? And so what he ends up doing with this gun that he fires is he zeroes out the kinetic energy of She-Hulk. So now she can't move, right? And he says, "The end guns can nullify anything that I fully understand. We learned thermodynamics in the 3rd grade. Try to remain calm. We'll be done here soon." Now, a lot of you guys who are familiar with the Ultimate Nullifier in Marvel Comics, specifically the main Marvel Universe, probably looked at this guy pulling the trigger and is like, well, this is the end of all things, because that's the way the Nullifier works, right? The power of the Nullifier is relative to the person who uses it in the main Marvel Universe. So if a person who's kind of a dum-dum, right, picks up the Ultimate Nullifier and pulls the trigger, likely nothing would happen. But if a person like Reed Richards picks it up and pulls the trigger, well, that's the end of everything, right? That's just See ya. Like it's been real and it's been good, but it ain't been real good. You know what I mean? And so the guns being used here in the Ultimate Universe are likely just kind of a more toned down, modified version of the Ultimate Nullifier as we're traditionally used to. And so again, right, we also get the introduction of Cosmo. And one of the most interesting things, right, that Cosmo's called the Star Stalker, and he stayed behind to protect humanity after all other canines ascended to a higher state of being, which is kind of wild, right? Imagine every dog on Earth just ascending to a higher state of entropy. The craziest thing ever. But then she says, I'm Captain Marvel, protector of the universe, wielder of the Omnibands. Do you really not remember me? Now, for everybody else here, right, the Ultimates, I mean, they're just getting crushed. It's not much of a fight at all. I mean, these guys are doing what they can where they can, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because she even refers to the Ultimates as these kind of mockeries of what should have been. That is kind of strange that to her, America Chavez refers to them as her friends. And so at that point, Captain Marvel's like, okay, there's something wrong with your mind. We need to figure out what it is. And of course, Cosmo, being a psychic dog, rolls up on her and tries to use his telepathy on her. The problem is that sections of her memories are gone. So among all the different people who had been hit by the Maker and had their histories modified, America Chavez is one of them. So seemingly, she really is a part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. She has served alongside this team. But at the end of the day, when she arrived here on Earth, by whatever manner and whatever means, which we'll find out here in a minute, because it's amazing that what ended up happening is the Maker got his hands on her and then basically just started like screwing with her head, removing her memories. But one of the things that goes on is that when they approach Cosmo, and it's just like, look, that was a huge intrusion to go into somebody's head like that. Of course, that happens after America Chavez freaks out and lashes out and kind of knocks the Guardians unconscious momentarily. That Cosmo's like, look, man, like, it goes against my principles to do this, right? To go into a person's brain and to invade like that. But understand, like, I read your minds. You all share the same bad dream. And that bad dream are the corpses of all the various members of the Ultimates and either the Watcher or most likely the Incredible Hulk, although I would like to believe that it's the Watcher, all standing over them. Now, I say it's the Incredible Hulk because of the round thing in the center of his head. The Incredible Hulk has that in the Ultimate Universe, but it would be kind of dope if it were the Watcher, and you guys will see why there is evidence to lend this possibility as we get towards the end of the video. Because again, the Doctor Doom drone is kind of watching everything that's unfolding here. And then like Star-Lord seizes the drone and starts addressing it directly. And he says, you are not the Doom that we know, but there's something familiar about you, something dangerous. What is it? And Dr. Doom's kind of flabbergasted. He's like, you can see me? Like, that's incredibly interesting because our encryption should prevent that from happening. But Star-Lord passes through the screen like the girl out of the ring. And it's just like reminded me of the numbers games we played as children. We can do things with your technology that you cannot even dream of. And he says, observing, always observing from behind your mask. You're looking for something, you will never find it. And so he's just like, I've temporarily disabled your space station's communication, surveillance, transportation, and weapon systems. Also, your primitive time machine. America belongs with us. Do not attempt to interfere. The man in the iron mask, the man in the iron lung. Now I remember who you are. One of you will be responsible for untold suffering and the deaths of trillions, and the other could save everything. Now, which one was which? And it's really fascinating because remember, right, and it's one of the things that people tend to forget when it comes to Ultimate Doctor Doom. He's Reed Richards. He's not the Maker, but he's Reed Richards of that universe. If you want to find out how that happened, check out the playlist at the end of the video. It's like the most tragic story ever, but most amazing story at the same time. It's going to scar you on a personal level, just saying. Just be aware of that. But it's amazing. But because of the fact that they are both Reed, of course, this guy that Star-Lord is seemingly talking about is either the Maker or this Reed, one of these two guys. So again, it's fascinating because in that moment is when you kind of pick up with what's basically been happening, where these guys come from, and just how far-reaching the effects are for what the Maker did. Because at that point, Captain Marvel, again, kind of involved in her fight with America Chavez, puts her hand up to her head and is like, if you don't remember anything, then I will show you my memories. And she was like, we were a thing, right? We had a life together. Our life in the 61st century, a post-scarcity, post-imperialist paradise in progress. This is what we lost. 250,000 super guardians protecting over 400 million inhabited worlds. The apogee of an unbroken age of heroes going back 4,000 years. The Guardians of the Galaxy save the universe on a monthly basis for millennia. Perhaps that's why we were so confident that we could do it again. Captain Universe was the first to notice. It presented as sharp chest pain and crushing grief, radiating from the 21st century and down the right arm. Now, one of the things to remember about Captain Universe, they are quite literally empowered by the Enigma Force and Eternity. So to become Captain Universe is to be one with the universe itself. It's the reason why in Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, when the multiverse was collapsing, the incursions were happening, the universe, Captain Universe, was like, there's nothing that we can do here, and just seemed very nonchalant about the ending of all things. So just something to know about in this instance. But she also says, soon, temporal seismographs were giving off impossible readings, indicating a catastrophe in time. A group of our most experienced guardians was sent to the past to investigate. Only one returned. And this guy says, the unmaker, we are unmade. And she says, the greatest minds of the galaxy convened. Mentor 137, which is most likely the 137th iteration of Mentor, the father of Thanos, and basically the guy who built the entire computer system that monitored Titan, right? The Parliament of World Minds, the human supreme intelligence, the eternal Unimind. Now, most of the guys are familiar with the supreme intelligence, but the idea that humans have basically managed to take all the most intelligent people in seemingly the history of the race, or at least those brains that they had access to, and combine them into a singular intelligent being is kind of nuts, right? Assuming that it's based on what the Kree did. And then, of course, the eternal Unimind, which is what happens when the Eternals merge their minds together. But she says ideas were suggested, debated, and discarded at the speed of light. It was an impossible challenge. Creation itself was racing to erase us. Now, here's why this is so important, and to provide some context here, right? Imagine a meteor crashing into the ocean, right? The tidal waves that it would produce. In this particular situation, the meteor is the maker showing up into this universe and screwing with the time stream, screwing with people's thoughts and who people were supposed to be. It did not exist in a vacuum. The tidal waves, right, spreading around the world as a result of this meteor crashing into it is the equivalent of the maker's actions spreading through the time stream. In effect, because he showed up in the modern day of this reality and started changing history in this reality, it has a cascading effect, and it affects the future of everything that's going on. So quite literally, the Guardians of the Galaxy in the 61st century are fighting reality itself. And that's why Captain Marvel says, so we did the impossible. We turned the entire 61st century into an arc, a century ship, and piloted all 100 years out of our unraveling reality and into the superflow, the informational space between universes. We escaped creation, but creation followed us. We found an army stationed just outside of time, led by a mad, brilliant conqueror, of course, referring to Kang the Conqueror, one of two villains from Jonathan Hickman's Ultimate Universe miniseries, which kind of jump-started all of this in the first place. Again, all that stuff's in the playlist. And he says, while the rest of us fought to protect our fragile century, our most powerful members, Captain Universe, Starbrand, Molecule Boy, Gerard the Phoenix, and even Gary, wielder of the Infinity Gauntlet, Gary, struggled to maintain the integrity of the ship, of a present without a past or a future. How to describe the death of a universe? The head holds only fragments, moments, Xandar the Bright Mind, hero star of Tronta, so overcome with grief, it went nova, then collapsed into a black hole. The 10 billion descendants of Banner, the so-called Planet Hulk, trying to hold back reality with their bare hands. The terrible bloated corpse of Galactus, the life-bringer, seeder of worlds, floating through space like a rotting rogue world, and the terrible things that had begun to grow inside of it. Now, this is not the first time we saw Galactus the Lifebringer, right? We saw that from the original Ultimates run, not really the original, but Al Ewing's Ultimates run, when basically Blue Marvel and Black Panther and America Chavez, Monica Rambeau, and Carol Danvers of the main Marvel Universe, when they literally finished Galactus's evolution, right? They basically overpowered him, finished his evolution, and he came out as a being creating life instead of consuming it. But kind of getting back into this, she says, as the 61st century fell apart around us, we pointed our ship back the way we came, into whatever reality had replaced ours, hoping for a soft landing. Countless centillions died on impact. 100 years splintered like cheap gopher wood. Tragedy on a biblical scale. A few guardians survived, thrown faster through light, through time, in every direction. I landed in the distant past with only Stone Age tools. I built our ship out of the broken fragments of the 61st century and began the search for other survivors. And so that's where Captain America chimes in, and he's like, but America's been here for years. Why are you just coming for her now? And what ends up happening, and this is a brilliant stroke by Dennis Camp here. He says, there's a 62-year span of hard time from 1963 to 2024, impenetrable even to us, the origin of the temporal anomaly that unmade our universe. Literally, it was created by the Maker. And this is the answer to the question, if the Maker did all these things to the universe, why doesn't somebody who can time travel like Doctor Doom or Iron Lad or somebody like that just go back and undo it all? Because they can't enter into that space. It's a giant impenetrable shell. So there's no ability to go to that point in time. If they were to try to time travel, for example, back to like 1963, when all of this started, they would hit a wall, right? And they would probably be destroyed. It would just be a crash landing, and that would be it. It's kind of crazy to wrap your head around, but it's still pretty awesome the way that this is done. And so the whole idea of what's going on here is that it's a rescue mission, right? That what Captain Marvel and the other Guardians of the Galaxy are doing is traveling around the entire timeline outside of that 62-year period and trying to find various other members of the Guardians of the Galaxy who crash landed here. Now, this is a way for Dennis Camp to basically say the superhero landscape on Earth is much bigger than we think it is, but there's also a lot that the Maker could have done and tampered with to bolster his forces that we didn't know about. And so initially the question is like, okay, but here's the thing. If you guys intend to rescue all the Guardians of the Galaxy and then go back in time and stop all of this from happening, right? Because to save your future, you have to effectively undo our present and set the present day to the way it's supposed to be, then wouldn't that eradicate all of us, right? Wouldn't we all die? And because of the way that Dennis Camp has written this, it's actually done perfect. 9 times out of 10, when it comes to time travel stories like this, it's the inverse, right? It's we need to save our future by either destroying your past or altering your present or something along those lines. And that's all modeled after Days of Future Past, right? It's what Chris Claremont did. It's why that story is so landmark, because virtually every time travel story in Marvel is in some capacity built on the framework of Days of Future Past. But this is not that. They're not coming from their future and trying to save it by basically eradicating the present day or making sweeping changes to all things in existence, which would alter their future. In order to save their future, they have to change the past, which will modify the present. So it's really cool, right? It's a really, really cool adjustment to the traditional time travel story, because the response to Star-Lord is, yes, right? If we go back in time and we basically stop the Maker from making all the changes that he made to your reality, preventing Peter Parker from becoming Spider-Man when he was supposed to become Spider-Man, stopping Thor from becoming a superhero, yada, 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 so on and so forth, then yes, you as you exist right now in this moment in time would cease to exist, and you would be replaced by whatever version of you there would have been had the maker not screwed up your timeline. But there are ways to get around that. He says, we have methods of timeline pruning and replanting. Given time, we can save everyone, i.e., we can just put your timeline in a whole new place. It's Dennis Camp basically saying it's entirely possible to turn what is now this reality into an alternate universe version of itself. So we can keep you alive, potentially even keep you here. And that happens all the time in Marvel, right? I mean, that happens all the time. The only way to get around that, the cascading effect of changes to the timeline, is to leave all of reality itself, wait for those cascades to pass you by, and then jump back in again. Right, it's like stepping out of a wave pool momentarily. And so again, it's a really, really cool adjustment. I mean, I love this comic. Like, it's phenomenal. And so ultimately, Captain Marvel's like, what do you say, America Chavez? Are you on board? Will you help us on our mission? And she's like, no, that's not going to happen. Now, here's this amazing revelation that happens, right? Because she hasn't told, like Captain Marvel has not told America Chavez everything. And so she's just like, what do you mean no? And she's like, no. And she's like, but everything we've been through, everything that's happened. And America Chavez says, those were beautiful memories, but they were yours, not mine. Can you understand? They do not belong to me anymore. I believe that I love you, but I don't know you. I don't remember everything, but I remember that I am part of something important here, and that I've committed myself to saving the future this way. The Maker comes out of the city in 10 months. We're going to be ready for him. We're going to fix the world. And that's where Captain Marvel's like, have you not been listening to anything I told you? We know this world's future. We've been there. We've seen it with our own eyes. You lose, America. The unmaker wins. But it's not just the maker, right? It's not just Reed who's there. Number one, you've got Kane the Conqueror who's there, and you have the Celestials, all these different versions of Iron Man. So likely what's been happening here, right? What the Maker has been doing inside the city is he's been cloning all these different superheroes, right? All these different beings that are out there and just making an army out of them. Not only that, keep in mind the nature of the Celestials, that yes, in Marvel Comics, the Celestials were made by the first Cosmos, and when the multiverse came into existence, they duplicated themselves and put a version of each of themselves into every single universe. But all the Celestials are, at the end of the day, is just hyper-evolved beings. There are people out there who are way more powerful than the Celestials. Molecule Man Owen Reese, for example, could snap his fingers and wipe out all Celestials in existence and be home in time for cornflakes. So if the Maker has enough time inside that city, given relative time dilation and how time passes there, he could hyper-evolve beings to the point that they can rival the Celestials, or that they themselves become the Celestials within this reality. We don't know the answer to that question, but it would be crazy. But even in hearing this, right, that there's no real way for them to win, America Chavez is like, I mean, maybe, right? But the future can change. We're proof of that, aren't we? And so ultimately, Captain Marvel gives her a kind of medallion, right? And says, this is a temporal flare. Wherever we are, whenever we are, we will see it. We will be there whenever it is that you need us. So this is not goodbye. And so the last thing she says to her is, good luck, America. I do not envy you. I've seen this world's future. It's all impossible choices and tragic outcomes. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. I got to tell you, man, Dennis Camp is amazing. Give this guy books. Like, Dennis Camp, I got, son, I gotta be honest, man. He's right up there with Jonathan Hickman as far as I'm concerned now, man. Like, his son. It's, man, it's amazing. But anyway, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you all later. Peace.